And new tonight here on The Current, a new report is out on the state of America's rural bridges. TRIP, a national transportation research nonprofit, found that 21% of Iowa's rural bridges are rated in poor or structurally deficient condition. That's the highest in the nation. For comparison, Illinois ranks 12th on that list with 9% of rural bridges with that poor rating. Joining us now to discuss this is Carolyn Kelly, TRIP's Director of Communication and Research. Carolyn, thank you so much for being here with us. I want to start with a nationwide look at this first. So, what did the report find about America's rural bridges and roads overall?
Sure, thanks for having me. So, rural roads in Iowa and across the country are so important to the nation's economy because they carry the goods from rural areas right here in Iowa to markets across the globe. And people in these rural areas rely on these roads every day to get them safely to their destination. But our report finds that there's a significant amount of deterioration on these rural roads and bridges, as well as some safety concerns. And they need some improvements and also safety upgrades. But in many cases, a lack of adequate transportation funding makes it hard to make all the needed improvements.
So when you zoom into Iowa and you say 1 in 5 of Iowa's rural bridges are in poor or structurally deficient condition, I mean, that seems really, really bad. What does that distinction actually mean, to be structurally deficient?
You're right. Iowa does have the highest share in the nation of rural bridges that are in poor condition. And as you mentioned, that's more than 1 in 5 of those bridges. And it's not just the rural bridges in Iowa. The state leads the nation in the overall share of bridges that are in poor condition. Now, bridges that are rated poor or structurally deficient have significant deterioration to the major components of the bridge. That's the bridge deck or the support or some of those other major components. It's important to note that these bridges are safe to travel on and that they're monitored very closely and maintained. But many of them do need significant repairs or even replacement in some cases. And bridges in poor condition, particularly in rural areas, are often closed or posted only for lower weight vehicles. That means that it restricts and it redirects large vehicles like agricultural equipment or school buses or emergency response vehicles, and it makes their trips even longer. That can waste valuable time, especially in the case of those emergency vehicles that might have to take a longer route to avoid some of these bridges.
Yeah, and we know that rural residents travel by car about 50% more than residents in urban communities, so a lot more driving on some of those rural roads and bridges. And I wanted to ask you about the roads themselves. What did the report find about Iowa's rural roads?
That's right. Our report also looked at the condition of pavement on rural roads and also at the fatality rates that we see on these rural roads in every state across the country. And in Iowa, almost 20% of rural pavements are in either poor or mediocre condition. And our report also finds that the traffic fatality rate on Iowa's rural roads was more than double the fatality rate on all other roads in the state. That's largely because these rural roads are more likely to have narrow lanes or limited shoulders or sharper curves and some steep slopes. Many of these rural roads could benefit from additional safety improvements that would help make the driving environment a little bit more forgiving so that if a driver does make a mistake, they don't pay for that mistake with their life.
Okay, so we know that Iowa's rural roads and bridges are in desperate need of help. We know that traffic fatalities go up or have higher numbers in these areas where more improvements are needed. So now we look at the reality that earlier this year, the U.S. Department of Transportation told Congress that nearly $200 billion in repairs is needed for our nation's rural roads, highways, and bridges. So could the 2021 Biden administration Infrastructure Act cover that price tag?
Sure, the federal infrastructure bill that was signed into law in 2021 increased federal transportation funding by more than 30%. And that bill also includes programs that are targeted to some of the needs of these rural roads and bridges. So those increased federal dollars have been very helpful, but it'll also be critical at the state and local level that Iowa and the localities are able to provide additional transportation funding so that Iowa can improve the condition of the rural roads that so many of the Iowans rely on.
Very important topic indeed. Carolyn, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate this.
Thank you.
For you guys at home, we have a link. You can view the full report in all 50 states up on our website. Just click on the As Seen on TV tab.